This is Woodland Meadow Park on the west side of Corvallis. This is just about 5 minutes from Woodland Hill Natural Park, where we've been before. And as the name would suggest, this is a park that combines woodland and meadow, mostly a nature park. So I'm going to see what is here. This is a meadow, but it's kind of maintained as such because otherwise brush and trees would start growing up here. So you can see the mowing lines in the grass here. Also part of the park, this is Coral House, C-O-R-L. And this is an event venue that is attached to the park. So people can rent it or hold events here. And, or at least that was the case. There's a sign that says closed to the public. Even after the pandemic is mostly under control, a lot of things have changed as far as event venues. And then walking just a little bit outside of it, we have that barn, which I think is also part of the site. This house and that barn, this was probably at one time a working farm. And the main thing here, we have these big oak trees. And like I said in Dimple Hill, you know, when you get to the west, you get this transition where you have an open chaparral type forest that kind of fades into a more traditional coastal rainforest. And so we have some really big oak trees all along here. And that's over there. That is where I'm going to go next. As I've said with several other parks like this I've been to, from this viewpoint I can look around, I can see the meadow, I can see the trees. It looks like could be anywhere. I could be 20 miles outside of Corvallis. But if we look over here, they're kind of hidden by the trees, but there's houses and apartments here. So this is just set right in the middle of the city. This is in the middle of a suburban neighborhood. It's just kind of disguised because we have some pretty big trees here. One thing about big trees, to quote Jimmy Cliff, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And here we see this oak tree, one of these bottom branches, which itself is big enough to be a tree, has split open. And in the past couple years, especially last year, we had a very hot, dry summer. And I believe the drought stressed a lot of trees, and you see things like this quite commonly. I saw other trees like that in this park. This meadow seems to be maintained to a meadow landform, so they're not letting brush overcome it, but also the main plant I see other than grass is just wild carrot, so not really maintained in a natural setting, although it looks like they are trying to reestablish the oak trees here. And what do we have here? Well, we have a little hawthorn plant growing up, which is an example of like brush trying to reassert itself. And over here, we have an oak tree growing on its own. So this meadow, which is a natural landform here, still has to be maintained because I believe that typically meadows here would be transitionary after firestorms or wind. So you have a meadow for a while before you have the brush and then the oak. For example, here we have some type of light, heavy equipment taking down a tree stump. And I remember seeing that tree earlier this year. It fell during the winter. So nature has to be very well maintained, I guess, is the moral of that lesson. Right now I'm on the other side of the road. I think this is still the park, but this could also just be a public walkway that's on the other side of the road. So this park, along with being a nature park, we also have this trail that is used both for recreational running, bicycling, walking, and also a pedestrian corridor. So I've said this before, there's a lot of good things about Corvallis, a lot of access to nature and recreation, and a lot of it I miss. I think I've said that before. So this park here, my second full day in Corvallis, which was almost exactly 2 years ago, September of 2020, I came to this park. And really, since then, I've only been back a couple of times because it's kind of on the other end of town and I have other places to go, but there is a lot of great recreational opportunities just in this city. So this is just one more I wanted to share. I did have one final point to make, which right here we can see some type of sedges. Then if we spin over here, we see this gully. So right now it's the middle of August and we are in a very Mediterranean climate. It hasn't rained for at least a month, and it hasn't rained seriously for 2 months, more than 2 months. So right now, you know, this looks all very dry. In winter and spring and autumn, all of this is going to be a marsh, and that's why you see the sedges here. So there's also times when this would be more interesting in terms of the plants and wildlife and insects we see. But right now we are in the middle of summer. It's always a surprise for me, you know, even though I've lived here pretty much all my life, 40 years. You know, when I look back at pictures or videos I took 6 months ago and remind myself what this area looks like when it's dripping with water and there's mud everywhere and there's plants growing up. So that's also something to like, you know, a diversity of climates between Mediterranean climate, which leads to this open woodland and chaparral, and you know, what comes close to being like a temperate rainforest climate about 6 months of the year.